On my birthday, I waited for my fiancé Christopher for 3 hours, and he didn't show up to celebrate with me. As a result, I saw him in my first girlfriend, Isabella's circle of friends. Her text gave a hint of melancholy. We were lost in our youth for years. Luckily, it's not too late to make up for it. I sneered and left the city overnight. I didn't realize that it would rain for the next few days, and the apartment building I lived in completely collapsed. I heard later that Christopher knelt on the rubble for 3 days and 3 nights, digging non-stop, agonizingly wishing in his heart that I would come back to life. I had arranged to celebrate my birthday with Christopher, but I didn't expect him to miss the appointment. I waited from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. The food on the table changed from hot to cold and cold to hot. After finishing the lamb chops alone, I saw Isabella's dynamic in the circle of friends. So many years lost in our youth. Thankfully, it's not too late to make up for it. The accompanying picture shows a side view of Christopher picking out jewelry in a jewelry store, with Isabella showing only a small portion of her arm. The sparkling bracelet on her white wrist is especially bright in the light. I can't help but think that my fiancé is really getting successful. I was lying in bed after my shower when Christopher finally returned. He lifted the covers and approached me with the cool night air. I subconsciously ducked toward the corner, trying not to make contact with him. Christopher, however, insisted on coming over, his thin fingers probing all the way up and finally stopping at my wrist. Something cold was on my wrist, and it felt a little hard. I lifted my hand to see a shiny bracelet on my wrist. This is such an exaggerated style. It's exactly like the one in Isabella's circle of friends. And it doesn't feel like anything new. Emily, do you like this? Christopher whispered to me. Under the moonlight, his hair was still covered with water, and a drop of water slowly slid down his neck. He looked at me seriously, his eyes revealing some anticipation, like he was waiting for me to take the initiative to get close to him and passionately give me a kiss. Just like I used to do whenever I received a gift from him. It felt good. I smiled casually, running my fingers lightly over his abs, and said, but I actually preferred it harder. Christopher nibbled on my shoulder strap, the distinctive scent of his body hitting me. When I woke up the next day, Christopher was gone. I checked Isabella's friend's circle out of habit, and this time there was indeed a new update. It looked like she was picking out her wedding dress. In one corner of the photo, the back of a man could be seen. Broad shoulders and narrow waist, straight legs. That's Christopher, all right. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who recognized him. One of my high school classmates left a comment saying, "Wow, this groom wouldn't be Christopher. The school bully back then. Would he?" Isabella sent a mischievous emoji. The comment section was instantly buzzing with congratulations. It's really a love match. The school flower and the school grass together really match. Don't forget to call me to drink the wedding wine when you get married. When I was in a daze, I suddenly received a message from Christopher on my cell phone. The kitchen has made skinny congee with eggs. I put down my cell phone, walked into the kitchen, and saw Christopher cooked porridge. The congee was in the thermos bucket, still a little hot. I poured out the congee and drank it. No matter how aggravating, you can't ignore your appetite. Christopher and Isabella married this thing. I have long expected it. When I was in high school, I knew Christopher. At that time, he had a good family condition and excellent grades, and was the male god in the hearts of many girls. Despite having many suitors, he only had his childhood friend, Isabella, in his heart. How could such a person be with me? After high school, Christopher's family went bankrupt. His dad chose to commit suicide because of the debt, while his girlfriend, Isabella, broke up with the reason that she wanted to study abroad. In spite of that, there were still a lot of girls who showed attention to him. It was really lucky that I could succeed. We got into the same university together and had just the right opportunity, and Isabella and I look quite similar. That evening, I easily found a drunken Christopher in the alley behind the school. By that time, he wasn't quite sober anymore. If Christopher, who used to wear blue and white school uniforms, was the school grass in my heart, full of youthfulness at that time, he made me feel as if he was a bit distant from me. At this moment, he was a little bit confused drunk, giving off an indulgent charm, and seemed to have not noticed this attraction himself. Passers-by occasionally passed by, and could not hide the surprise in their eyes when they saw him like this. I put my hands in my pockets and stood in front of him. Christopher didn't look up and said coldly, "Don't come any closer." "Christopher," I called out to him. "Why are you so mean?" Christopher looked up and visibly froze when he saw my face. I took Christopher back to the rental house. He didn't refuse while lying on the bed. I told him my name and reminded him that we went to high school together. He whispered that nothing in particular struck him. The moonlight outside the window was a little blurry. Christopher's eyes grew clearer as he looked at me. I took off my jacket, and as the last piece slipped off my shoulders, he turned his head and tried to brace himself to get away. Seeing the slight reddening of his ears, I thought to myself how I could let the prey I had already caught escape. I got up and squeezed his shoulders, cupped his face, and initiated a kiss. Christopher instinctively tried to push me away, but when he saw my eyes, the hand that resisted eventually slowly dropped. I knew what was going through his mind, but I didn't care. Besides, for someone as self-managed as Christopher, this was probably the only time in his life that he would relax himself. It would be a real shame to miss it. What I didn't expect was Christopher's childishly adorable response. Turns out he'd never had contact with Isabella before, which was a bit of a surprise to me. After that, I got out of bed and went to take a shower. It was time for me to go, he said. I pointed to the door as I toweled my hair. Whatever, Christopher stood up but didn't go. He looks around, opens the balcony door to get some air, then finds the faucet and washes his soiled shirt. I can't go out like this, he explained. I wasn't in the mood to pay attention to him. Christopher glanced around the room a few times before finally coming back up to me and lowering himself to ask me if it hurt. His eyes moved over my face and finally stopped at my lips. I threw the towel away and casually said, "It's only been a few minutes, it's nothing." Christopher's expression immediately became heavy. Maybe it touched his pride. He stopped talking, but his eyes became deeper. Before I had time to react, Christopher was already bracing one hand on my ear and the other around my waist. Encircling me in his breath and kissing me, he learns things so fast. When my head hit the bedpan, I bit my lip to keep the sound from coming out. Later, we were together, really just using each other. Christopher still thinks of Isabella in his heart. He often looks at the photos posted in her friend's circle and stares at them. In these photos, Isabella's life is still wonderful and luxurious. Christopher, who is heavily in debt, doesn't dare to contact his first love. This, in turn, gave me an opportunity. Maybe because the first time was so embarrassing, Christopher kept trying to prove that it was just an accident. Having just turned 20, he was full of energy. And all of it was focused on me. After a few days, it got a little too much for me. He was taking classes during the day and working a couple part-time jobs after school to pay off his debts. When he got off work at 10 o'clock p.m., if someone came to see me, he usually talked until dawn. By the time I woke up with 2 big black circles under my eyes, Christopher was already tidying up the room. The best people are not only energetic, they are even more self-motivated than others. It's the same with me when it comes to housework. And since I don't do anything, I naturally need to bring some emotional value to the other person. I always like to call Christopher's name, and when he turns around, just smile and rest my face and say, "I really like you," seeing him busy with his studies and work. I pretended to be heartbroken and comforted him by saying, "Don't work so hard, I'll come and take care of you in the future," and I always made up some bright future for him. Where is that future? It doesn't matter. I don't have much money anyway. This short-lived relationship lasted until his junior year of college, until Christopher had an accident while doing a part-time job. That day, he went to a game studio to do motion capture modeling and was in the middle of recording. I happened to be delivering milk tea to him, and the fill light on my head suddenly fell off. It was really too much of a coincidence. The fill light was going to hit Christopher's head, but I pushed him away. As a result, the light hit my leg and blood flowed out. In the hospital, Christopher was sitting in front of his bed, looking a bit disoriented. Why did I try to help him? The answer was really simple. I really didn't want to see this perfect face ruined. Even if it was someone else who was there, I would have stepped in to save them. However, Christopher seemed to have a different opinion, and he was adamant that "You're in love with me. Emily, I will cherish you." At that time, I was injured because of my leg. Christopher moved over to take care of me. At first, I thought he would find it troublesome, but I didn't expect him to be more caring than I thought. He helped me pick out my clothes every morning, and even asked me the style of my underwear. He also helped me comb my hair and make different hairstyles. Even something as simple as eating, he would take the initiative to feed me without me having to say anything. Summer clothes were already thinner, And besides, Christopher was still young. We had some experiences on the kitchen counter in front of the bathroom mirror, by the balcony railing, and even on the living room couch. Well, learning, to be exact. The frequency of intimate encounters often leads one to believe that the relationship is deep. Sometimes, I would even think that Christopher was really in love with me. But I soon realized that, after all, he always kept a picture of Isabella from high school in his wallet. He will always have a place for her in his heart. After graduation, Christopher paid off his debt and joined a famous gaming company, and our lives started to change for the better, transferring red packets of luxury bags of big-name cosmetics. Christopher bought things for me as if he was making up for something, and was completely uncaring about money. I was accepting of anyone who came by, whether they were giving money or gifts. I don't care what's going on in their minds or if they see someone else in me. For that, I don't care at all. Just as our lives were getting better, his first love, Isabella, returned home. When she first came back, Christopher acted disgusted, but Isabella insisted on waiting downstairs at our house all night. At midnight, there was thunder and lightning outside the window. Christopher tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. By 3 a.m., he finally couldn't help himself and hurriedly changed his coat. Ready to go out, I'm going to meet a friend. Through the rain-blurred glass window, I saw Christopher catch the limp Isabella under the dim streetlight. The anxious look on his face was like nothing I had ever seen before. Shortly afterward, Isabella's good friend Rachel added my WeChat and told me directly, "Emily, suggest you leave on your own and be sensible. They grew up together and have a deep bond. It is not appropriate for you to do this. If you don't let go, you will only hurt yourself in the end." I couldn't help but laugh when I saw these words. It felt like I was the villainous character in a dog and pony show. What happened next was more like the development of the plot, because when Isabella came to me on her own accord, I almost got her hurt. As soon as she saw me, she said this: "You don't deserve to be with Christopher." We were sitting on the terrace of the cafe, and Isabella was wearing a light gray tailored dress and a cashmere beret on her head. And the whole thing looked like an elegant gardenia, only it didn't look good. I took a sip of my coffee. "Is that so? I looked into your background. You were sent to live with your grandmother when you were a child and were kicked out in less than 3 months. Then you went to a distant relative until grandma died and your uncle took you home. But instead of being grateful, you hurt him in an argument. After that, no relative wanted to receive you and you ended up in an orphanage. If it wasn't for the Smith Group, you wouldn't have been able to go to school." My patience wore thin. I looked at her and said, "Isabella, you've done a really detailed investigation. A poor person who doesn't get much attention actually wants Christopher too." I really didn't want to listen to her crap and just gave her a slap on the face. "Do you have a tutor? Why don't you mind what you say?" After the slap, I felt much more relaxed, but Isabella suddenly coughed violently, then bent down and spat out a large mouthful of blood. I was shocked and said, "Isabella, that's a really old-fashioned move, isn't it?" Isabella kept spitting out blood and was in a very critical condition. I could only rush to call the emergency number. After hesitating for a while, I called Christopher again. Christopher heard that something happened to White Moonlight and rushed here faster than an ambulance. The first thing I saw when I got there was Isabella's face with the imprint of her hand. Christopher's face was very bad and asked me, "How are you going to explain this?" Of course I'm going to explain it. I'll explain what happened very clearly. A man can give in, but he can't take responsibility that he shouldn't have. After Christopher heard this, he frowned and said to Isabella, "Why did you mess with her?" This sentence sounds like blaming Isabella, but on second thought it is full of care and defense. Always coming to trouble me? Am I that idle? Christopher took off his jacket and gently helped Isabella wipe away the blood on her face. Although the action looks a bit rough, it's actually very gentle. Isabella leaned weakly on his shoulder and said, "Christopher, am I going to have an accident?" "No," Christopher replied. "I'll take you to the hospital." Just as he was about to leave, Christopher suddenly turned around, wanted to say something but stopped, looked at me and said, "Emily, you need to change your temper. No matter what, it's not right to hit a patient." I looked at Christopher and suddenly had a feeling in my heart that I wanted to laugh. It turns out that these things don't really make much sense. When someone a man cares about in his heart makes a mistake, that person is still lovable in his eyes. I suddenly felt a twinge of sadness. Isabella really was the one person he couldn't let go of in his heart. making all my efforts over the past 6 years meaningless. Seeing that I was unhappy, Christopher said in a gentle tone, "Don't be angry, I bought you a gift." The gift he was talking about was the bracelet that was exactly the same as Isabella. I raised my hand and looked at the bracelet on my wrist. The bracelet was inlaid with many small diamonds, especially dazzling. However, I didn't care. The days went by simply, and that bracelet I put in the deepest part of the drawer and never wore it again. However, it was a bit strange that Isabella had come back and Christopher didn't break up with me. Instead, it was Isabella who couldn't resist first. That day happened to be my birthday. The food was just on the table when Christopher's cell phone rang. He immediately stood up and said to me, "Sorry. I'm in a bit of a hurry, I may not be back tonight." I softly answered to him. Christopher, however, suddenly came closer and looked at me seriously. "Why have you become so well-behaved lately?" I asked calmly, "Even if I don't let you go, will you still stay?" Christopher didn't answer this question directly. He touched my head and casually said, "Don't think too much," then left in a hurry. I looked at the dishes on the table and was almost moved to tears, because the dishes that Christopher made were just too bad to eat. Just as I was about to throw the dishes away, Isabella sent me a photo. In the photo, Christopher was sitting in front of her hospital bed, adjusting the speed of the Roman 4. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. However, Isabella asked with a smug look on her face, "I heard it was your birthday?" Unfortunately, he decided to stay with me. "So it seems that your place in his heart is not that important," I responded. "Then you have to give me a red envelope to apologize." Isabella was silent. Since the night of his birthday, Christopher stopped coming home and contacted me less and less. He used to give me a video call every few days, but gradually it became once a week. And finally, it turned out to be only a monthly greeting. I didn't have to think much to realize that he was spending all his time with Isabella. It's just that their relationship developed a lot slower than I thought it would. 3 whole months passed before a major change finally came. It started when Rachel sent me a video. In the video, Isabella looked a little shy. She was asked, "When are you and Christopher planning to get married?" Isabella's face turned a little red. "At the end of the year, everyone must come." Everyone around her smiles and responds, "They will definitely support it." Christopher sat next to her, looking calm and agreeing, although I was prepared for it when I really saw that scene. My heart was still gripped hard. That night, I sat on the couch and dialed Christopher. Christopher's voice sounded tired. "Emily, I just finished the party and am ready to go rest." I asked directly, "Do you have something you want to say to me?" "What words?" Christopher looked puzzled. I had a lot of things I wanted to say in my mind, but what finally came out was, "Christopher, we've been together for 6 years. When are we getting married?" It was just a tentative question, however. Christopher was silent for a long time. After a while he spoke, "Emily, I can't think about marriage right now." I gripped my cell phone tightly and tried to act indifferent. "Oh, I didn't say I have to get married either." "I am sorry, Emily." Christopher's voice was a little hoarse. "Can you again?" I immediately hung up the phone. In fact, from the beginning, I knew that Christopher and I would not have a good result. But knowingly, the heart will still be so hard. A drop of cool water suddenly fell on the face. At first, it was just a little bit, and it didn't take long for it to become continuous. What in the world is going on here? I looked up and realized that the crack in the roof was leaking again. It has been raining in New York lately, and it has been raining continuously for half a month, and it still hasn't stopped. Staying at home and catching up on a movie on a rainy day like this should actually be blissful. But the apartment building I live in is just so broken. The house was in such disrepair that moss grew in the cracks of the bricks, and water leaked from time to time. I glanced at the siding near the roof, which had bulged and felt soft. When I didn't have money, I thought this house was cheap. Later, when I had money, I realized that this place held too many memories of Christopher and me, and I couldn't bear to move out. But sooner or later, this house will have problems. Just like my relationship with Christopher, there was nothing to hold on to. I moved the couch out of the way and found a bucket to catch the leak. The house had had its share of problems over the years, and Christopher had fixed it once before. "We'll get a nice house when I'm done with this game project." He was lying next to me at the time and asked, "Emily, what kind of house do you want?" "I want a big bungalow with floor-to-ceiling windows, preferably a big villa, something extra spacious." I answered whatever he asked me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Christopher smiling. Since the incident at home, Christopher seldom smiles, always looks cold and indifferent, as if he hides all his emotions under a mask. When he smiles, it's like the ice melts, spring comes, and flowers bloom. I looked mesmerized, suddenly a little shy. This villa is so expensive, am I thinking too much? There will be. Christopher took me into his arms and gently whispered in my ear, Emily, give me a little more time. Those warm moments were only fleeting memories after all. The reality is, he's secretly engaged to Isabella. From the moment he chose Isabella, my story with Christopher should have ended. I decided to break up with Christopher. On Valentine's Day, Christopher still didn't show up. I sent him a message asking him, do you have time to meet up? I have something I want to talk to you about. Christopher never replied me. Just when I was about to call again, his assistant contacted me first. This young man, who had just joined the company not long ago, was particularly enthusiastic. On the phone, he excitedly told me that Christopher had prepared a surprise for me and told me to go and have a look. When I arrived at the appointed place, I realized that there was no special gift. The assistant drove me around a few times and finally stopped at the entrance of a villa area. He gave me an access card for a certain building. The house was more than 200 square meters. The large floor-to-ceiling windows were dry and clean, with a view of the rolling mountains on the right and a whole lively new cityscape on the left. This is specially prepared for you by Christopher, the assistant said with a smile. I stood in the spacious living room, feeling a little confused. Was this really a gift from Christopher? I couldn't believe it, the assistant said excitedly. Christopher has been preparing this gift for a long time. He has been wanting to give you a surprise, showing that he really cares about you. Hearing this, I had a complicated feeling in my heart, like countless little bugs crawling in my heart. It turns out that Christopher really still remembers this matter. The door lock suddenly turned, and Isabella pushed the door in. Even the assistant was startled by her sudden appearance. Her expression was a little uncomfortable. Isabella coldly asked, "This is my house. What are you doing here?" The assistant said somewhat nervously, "This is what Christopher prepared for Emily." Isabella coldly smiled, then took out her cell phone and played a voice. "Wang, the house has been given to Isabella." About Emily, Christopher paused for a moment and continued, "I will think of another way to compensate her. You don't tell her about the house first." The assistant stood there a bit awkwardly, glanced at me, and his face reddened all of a sudden. He didn't expect me to be right here to hear this. Isabella hangs up her voice and scoffs, "Get it? This house is mine now." She turns to me and smiles a little coldly. "Emily, you're an outsider. How can you stay in my house? Please leave." I gave her a casual look and turned to leave. Without taking a few steps, Isabella grabbed my hand again. She stared hard at the ring on my hand and said, "How did this bracelet come to be with you? You should return it to the real owner." She tries to take things by force, and I shrug off her hand and push her against the wall. You know how to rob other people's things. What else do you do but man up? Looking back now, it's so uncomfortable for people to say that I'm like you. Besides, it was clearly your own choice to abandon Christopher and go abroad in the first place. Right, there was nothing I could do about it. Isabella looked at me indignantly. I was seriously ill at that time. Christopher had just gone bankrupt. I could only lie to him that I was going to study abroad, or else let him watch me wait here to die. "Emily," she sneered, "you'll never catch up with me because no matter what I want, he won't say no, so that's how it is." I froze, my hand unconsciously loosening. No wonder Christopher chose to accept her. It turns out that Isabella had to leave back then because of her illness. Isabella suddenly dropped to the floor, and after coughing violently, her eyes closed and she fainted. I put her on the sofa and said to my assistant, "Don't tell Christopher about today. You take her to the hospital, I'll leave first." I was ready to leave. Not only was I breaking up, but I was going to leave New York and make my way to Los Angeles. I found an agency that specializes in buying designer labels to get rid of all the things Christopher gave me. "This bracelet is so pretty. Do you want to sell it too?" The agent asked me. I nodded. After a week of desperately submitting resumes, I had received interview invitations from several gaming companies. After accompanying Christopher in his stand-in role for so long, I was getting tired of it. And in my opinion, being jealous was a really boring way to live. Life was short and I had more important things to do. I handed in my resignation, bought a plane ticket to Los Angeles, and was ready to start over. I never told Christopher about this decision, Only after everything was arranged did Christopher see his cell phone and call me back. "What's up? Do you have time to meet today?" I said. "There are some things I want to talk to you about." Christopher said, "I also happen to have something I want to talk to you about." I thought he should want to talk to me too. Christopher's tone was relaxed, even a little happy. "Wait for me at home tonight. Don't go anywhere else." We ended up making an appointment to meet at the rented house at 5 in the evening. My ticket was for 10 p.m., but by the time 7 p.m. rolled around, Christopher still hadn't shown up. I called and there was no answer. I opened Isabella's friend's circle, and sure enough, I saw a new picture she had posted. In the picture, Isabella is wishing on a birthday cake. Christopher was sitting next to her, looking down at the cake, looking a little lost in thought. He still decided to stay by Isabella's side at the last moment when I was about to leave the city. I stopped waiting and dragged my suitcase to the airport alone. After arriving at my destination, I rested at the hotel for the night. The next day when I watched the news, I realized that New York had some old buildings collapse last night because of the heavy rains that had been going on for the last few months. This included the apartment building where we were staying. I felt thankful and scared. Thankfully, Christopher didn't show up, and I didn't have to wait too long. What I didn't expect was to see Christopher on the live news broadcast. The site of the collapse had been cordoned off, and reporters were on the scene. At that moment, Christopher suddenly jumped into the camera and ran towards the depths of the rubble. "Don't rush," rescuers shouted from behind. "It could collapse again. It's too dangerous." Christopher doesn't hear them. He knelt on the ground, digging desperately into the masonry with his hands, his voice trembling as he said, "My girlfriend is still in there." Rescuers tried to persuade him. "Now we must wait for the professional rescue team to come. You will only make things worse." Christopher's eyes were full of anxiety, completely disregarded the advice, broke away from the rescuers, ready to rush in. Soon, more staff came over to pull him down together. Christopher desperately grabbed the ground. His palms were cut by the sharp stones and blood was flowing. But he was still struggling and was eventually taken away by force. At this point, I was lying on the hotel bed, holding the remote control in my hand, frozen in place. Seeing this scene, I was completely frozen. Had Christopher misunderstood something? I hadn't bothered to contact him to try to clear up the misunderstanding. After all, good exes are supposed to never see each other again, just like in the past. And as sad as he is right now, with Isabella by his side, he'll get better soon. After all, they have to get married again. Los Angeles is an inclusive and vibrant city. Many people come here from their hometowns to make their first buck in this popular business environment. There is a lot of competition here, and it has allowed me to focus more on my career. In less than 2 years, I found my place in the gaming industry. The job was just too exhausting, and I was always looking for new opportunities to achieve financial freedom sooner. Luckily, I met a client named Lily who gave me a great opportunity. We are both individual developers working independently, and soon after we started, we realized that we share a common love for secondary characters. We started working on a relationship game together. In fact, it was mostly because of work requirements. The gaming industry is essentially about understanding players' preferences and making them happy to spend money. In this era where everyone is creating, traditional games are gradually becoming less popular, and many indie games continue to appear. Anyone can make a very successful game if they find the right direction. We select potential indie developers, give them technical support and distribution channels, and take a cut. Maybe that says something about our vision. Most of the games we sign up for are big hits and extremely profitable, and the developers are scraping the bottom of the barrel. Although I don't think I've worked particularly hard. Thanks to these games, the studio has grown from about a dozen people to more than 300. The company's valuation also exceeded $1 billion. This meant that I had finally reached financial freedom. I was a bit overwhelmed by the success at the very beginning. As the game studio continued to grow, there were more and more people around who were interested in me. There were people who offered to be my personal assistant after a working meal. There were also people who secretly expressed good feelings while talking about projects. There were also people who pretended to meet me by chance, but in fact, it was carefully arranged. It is often said that when a man is successful in his career, he attracts a lot of attention from women. In fact, women can have similar experiences. There was even someone who was particularly aware of my interests and recommended a young college student who had just graduated to me. Named Jack, I was told that he had been the man of the hour at school since high school. I was fine with it, but in some ways, he really did look like Christopher. Suddenly going soft, I let him stay. He became my assistant. At that moment, I finally understood how Christopher felt when he first met me. When I go out, I often let Jack drive me around. One day, Jack suddenly asked me if I had offended anyone. He said that recently he always felt that a black car was following us. When we got to the entrance of the neighborhood, Jack carefully said, "Boss, why don't I go to your house for a while, so that it will be safer to guard you?" When I was about to reply, there was a sudden sound from the garden. When I turned my head, I saw a small white dog running out of the bushes. There's no need to say anything, I said. When I entered the elevator, I found that the vacant house across the street seemed to have moved in a new neighbor not long ago, and there was a festive Chinese character for fortune pasted on the door. It should be a newlywed couple. Before going to bed, I suddenly recalled a memory. It was the first Chinese New Year that Christopher and I spent in a simple hut. After he cooked the dumplings, he was by the window earnestly cutting the window pane. Chinese New Year always needs a bit of ceremony, Christopher said to me with a smile. Although the house was a bit shabby, under the warm light, the red window pane reflected his side face, like a cozy painting. I didn't expect that the person I was thinking about would really appear in front of me the next day. Lily introduced me to him. She mentioned several times that an investor was interested in our project. I went to see him the next day. The man was sitting in the window seat of the cafe, wearing black casual clothes, with Buddha beads on his hands, looking very elegant. My heart shook and I was about to walk over, but I didn't expect him to turn his face. And it was Christopher. How could it be him? I frowned and felt like walking away. "Emily," Christopher calmly called out to me, "would you like a drink?" As I sat down across from him, I noticed how much weight Christopher had lost over the years. "Are you in poor health?" I asked him curiously, my eyes stopping at the Buddha beads on his wrist. "Where did they come from? You started to believe in Buddhism?" Christopher lowered his head. The corners of his eyes were a little red. "No, this was given to me by the master in the temple." I was a little surprised. He went on to say, "I lived in the temple for 2 years. He looked up at me. His tone was very calm. "Do you know why?" "How would I know?" Christopher looked out the window and said softly, "You probably don't want to know much." He didn't say anything else and went on to talk about investments. On his way out, Christopher said, "I'll take you home." Jack had already walked into the store and waved at me from a distance. I replied, "No, someone will pick me up." Jack walked to the table, smiled slightly at Christopher and said, "Thanks, but my girlfriend is here. I'll just pick her up." Christopher sat, feeling a little uncomfortable. After getting into the car, Jack asked, "Boss, who was that guy just now, ex-boyfriend?" I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes to rest. Jack almost hit the brakes. "Hug your ex-boyfriend? I thought it was some bad karma. So will he misunderstand us?" I laughed. "What do I care about that since we broke up? Let him be." I didn't realize that my relationship with Christopher was more complicated than a chance encounter. Back in the neighborhood, I met Christopher again in the elevator. I looked at him and said, "Don't tell me this is pure coincidence. I'm staying here." Christopher said. The elevator stopped and he stopped in front of the door across from me. The fingerprint lock opened automatically with a click. Christopher turned and looked at me with deep eyes. "Good night, Emily." I closed the door hard. "Lily, do you have another house? I'd like to live somewhere else." "What's wrong?" she asked, confused. I told her about meeting Christopher. "Oh, so he's your ex-boyfriend?" Lily said with a smile. "No wonder he wants to invest in us so badly." "Does he have a house?" I asked a little impatiently. "No time for that," Lily said. "He is already a partner in our subsidiary. He just signed the contract last week." "Don't worry about it," Lily reassured me. "He'll still be at your disposal from now on." When I arrived at work the next day, I did see Christopher. My coworkers, attracted by his appearance, surrounded him inside and out, planning a welcome party for the new leader. I walked straight into the office and closed the door. At noon, there was a knock at the door. Thinking it was Jack visiting, I opened the door and was surprised to see Christopher standing there. "Lily asked me to give this to you." He smiled and handed me the bento box. With everyone watching, I could only take it. One taste told me that Christopher made it himself. I really didn't understand what he was trying to do. Showing up out of nowhere and slowly entering my life and work without saying anything. It wasn't long before I met Isabella. in order not to run into Christopher at work. I went to the Community Chest Foundation the next day. This is the organization I set up after my business success, specializing in helping people in need. I didn't expect that Isabella was among those who came to apply for grants today. When she learned that the founder of the foundation was me, she had a sneer on her face. I didn't realize that you were not only alive, but living such a good life. Weren't you seriously ill? How can you still be living so well? I asked rhetorically. That's a lie, Isabella said, not against you, but against someone in my family. If I hadn't faked my illness, I would have been killed by my stepmother. Emily, it's a blessing to be unburdened like you. I'm blushing. I hope you'll be so lucky in your next life, Jack, asked the young lady out. We stared at each other for a while, and Isabella's demeanor began to ease. She begged me, Emily, please help me, I'm pregnant and really need the money. I responded mercilessly, go to Christopher if you're pregnant. What's he got to do with it? Isabella scoffed, he's been out of order for a long time, who knows where or when. Her tone turned cold. He even gave up revenge for you. What an obsession. I almost asked, but held my tongue. Isabella's words didn't sound very believable. However, she went on to say, we had agreed to help each other. He helped me get my inheritance back, and I helped him take revenge. But when you went wrong, he didn't care. What does that mean? I finally asked. Christopher's company's collapse was actually arranged by my dad in secret. And the company that benefited the most was the one I was in. He approached me with the purpose of infiltrating our company and finding evidence of my dad breaking the law. There was never any real love between us. He only cared about you in his heart. She smiled with malice. You don't know, do you? That night of the heavy rainstorm. He thought you were gone, so he mutilated himself, wanting to go with you. By the time he was found, he had slashed his wrist so many times that although he was resuscitated, he couldn't use that hand anymore. I felt a chill run through my body. Later, he still found evidence of my father and put him in jail. I suggested he marry me and inherit the company. But he chose to become a monk. If he hadn't left, I wouldn't have met that scammer and swindled all my money. It's all your fault. It's outrageous, Isabella said, as she became emotionally out of control, holding her head and started screaming, as well as frantically banging on the wall. I rushed to call an ambulance. The paramedics arrived and explained that she was a patient in a mental hospital and had been looking for her. Isabella struggled desperately. Emily, come help me. Let me get out of here and find that liar, and I'll be sure not to pester Christopher again, I said to the paramedics. Get her out of here quickly. When I got home, I saw Christopher. He was sitting on my doorstep with his legs curled up, his eyes a little dull. His eyes looked hollow. It wasn't until he saw me that he regained some of his vigor. Emily, you're back. I didn't say much, directly grabbed his wrist and pulled off those Buddhist beads layer by layer. Sure enough, the bottom was full of horrible scars. Christopher tried to pull his hand back into his sleeve. It was hard for me, and my heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. So angry that I raised my hand and slapped him. Christopher, what the hell is wrong with you? He was knocked off his head, but in the next second, he still held my hand tightly and pressed it to his face. I thought I'd never see you again. His cheeks were swollen and he still held my hand, stroking it gently. Emily, I know I've put you through a lot and I'm sorry. But I didn't betray you or fall in love with anyone else. Can you forgive me? I looked at him coldly. Christopher, I said, I don't care what reason you have. Besides, I already have a boyfriend, it's Jack. Said I tried to pull my hand back, but Christopher held on to it. We looked at each other and a tear slipped from Christopher's eye. My heart tightened as I watched Christopher cry. His hand gripped tighter, but his eyes were desperate. If I may, he said in a dry but firm voice, I just want to be your shadow and be by your side forever. Is that okay? I opened the door to my room and sat on the couch in the living room. I'll give you 10 minutes, I said, to get everything straight. If you lie, then we'll never see each other again. Want to start with me having a crush on you in high school? Christopher asked softly, and I responded a little confused. What? Christopher looked at me seriously and said that he had been watching me since the day school started. I went to Smith Group and was in the same grade as him. And he's always been watching me. Didn't you know Isabella well? We're neighbors, but I don't have feelings for her. She's the one who said we were in a relationship. I asked, then why do you have a picture of her in your wallet? Christopher explained that Isabella deliberately slipped that photo to him in public. This misunderstanding instead helped him avoid a lot of trouble. So he didn't explain in detail. In fact, I never took this photo out purely because I forgot it was still in my wallet. I've been silently following you for the past 3 years, thinking it was just plain old concern. It wasn't until I saw other boys chasing after you that I realized I'd liked you a long time ago. I had been preparing for a confession for a long time, but it happened to coincide with the entrance exams, and there were problems at home later on. That day, you took the initiative to look for me at the bar. I was actually a little angry in my heart, but I didn't want to reject you. What if you went for someone else? Although the first time the situation is indeed a bit awkward. Christopher knelt in front of me and put his face in my lap. He said that time was his happiest memory. It wasn't until after graduation that he learned some of the truth about Smith Group's bankruptcy that year. And that's when his revenge plan slowly began to take shape. Isabella returned to Christopher in order to realize the collaboration. Her mother died less than 3 months after giving birth, and her father married a stepmother about her age. She is resentful of both her father and stepmother, and also needs Christopher's help. Christopher didn't want to agree to it, but he's just not strong enough on his own against a force as powerful as the Smith Group. The opportunity is fleeting. If he missed Isabella's line, he didn't know how long it would take to realize his revenge. After careful consideration, Christopher decided to work with the other party. As one of his own, it was indeed easier to win Smith Group's trust and enter Smith Group's circle. Christopher said that he originally wanted to tell me everything, but it had to wait until everything was taken care of. What he didn't realize was that the rain would destroy our home. Isabella took the house that was supposed to be mine. That night, he asked me to wait for him. He wanted to give me a key to the Smith Group's former villa. He already had incriminating evidence against the Smith Group. When everything was settled, he wanted us to have a real home. I didn't realize that I really did die that night. It was then that he realized what a stupid thing he had done. Feeling desperate, he tried to commit suicide without success and finally chose to become a monk. 2 years later, he saw me in a live broadcast at a game show. Just a sideways glance that quickly passed by actually made him panic and break the cup in his hand. Christopher stared at me. His eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of fog. "Emily, as long as you are still here, I don't care about anything anymore." I still refused him. "Christopher, let bygones be bygones. We can't go back to the past. Besides, I'm quite happy with my life now. If you truly love me," I said, looking him in the eye, "then you should leave my life forever." That wasn't really too much to say. But Christopher's face instantly became bloodless. I tossed and turned during the night, unable to sleep. The obvious scars on Christopher's wrists kept flashing in my mind. I was actually lying to him and to myself. Can the past really be erased as easily as dust? It was fine when he wasn't around. I could slowly build a high wall in my heart. But the moment he appeared, that wall collapsed instantly. "It's okay. I've always been tough with my mouth and hard on myself." I sent a message to Lily, telling her that I was going out of town to investigate a new project and prepare to open a branch. The departure was quickly arranged. The night before I left, I looked at my friend's circle one last time. I ended up seeing Christopher's dynamic. He added my WeChat a few days ago in the company. I remembered that he never used to send a friend circle to anyone. So this sudden appearance of the friend circle made me quite surprised. I clicked in, and the moment I saw the content, I sat up straight at once. He had sent a whole bottle of sleeping pills that would kill. I immediately jumped out of bed and frantically knocked on his room door. The phone also dialed several times in a row. It was a long time before Christopher, in his robe, finally opened the door. "Christopher, what took you so long to open the door? It's really worrying," I said. Christopher looked at me and smiled instead. There were droplets of water sliding down his neck, and he looked down at me and said, "Emily, are you just now getting it?" His gaze was like a fine web, wordlessly trapping me. By the time I reacted, Christopher had already wrapped his arms around my waist. "You could have pushed him away," he said calmly. "Emily, I'm not like you. I live to love you. Instead of living a meaningless life like these years, I'd rather choose to end it all. So just don't leave me." "Okay, I need your company too." The sound of a light rain came from outside the window. "It's raining." I turned my face away and said, "You're forcing me to make a choice." Christopher shook his head gently. "No, I'm just asking you to love me." I was exhausted by him. "You don't have to do this, Christopher. Someone will love you." Christopher looks at me, the light in his eyes slowly fading. "I'm sorry." He forced out a smile. "I made you laugh tonight." After he finished, he let go of me and turned to walk into the room. I subconsciously followed. The room's decor was simple, all black with a soft carpet on the floor. "Why aren't you leaving yet? I need you to be emotionally stable." I said carefully, "I'm afraid to just leave until then." Christopher didn't say another word and silently unbuckled his robe. "It doesn't really have to be that complicated," he said suddenly. "I never asked you to take responsibility. So why don't we try again?" Christopher leaned in close to me, his eyes revealing a sense of vulnerability and danger. "I promise I won't let Jack know." I think I lost my mind, and instead of refusing his offer, I tangled with him until dawn. I was on the verge of falling asleep when Christopher kept tossing and turning. He couldn't help but sit up and gently touch my face or hair, as if to make sure I was still with him. After many such touches, I finally couldn't help myself and lowered my voice to complain. "Christopher, why are you so strange? What do you mean by tossing me around? Trying to make me unbearable? Can you rest or not?" Christopher apologized while holding me tighter. By the time I woke up at noon, Christopher had already arranged everything, and the aroma of porridge wafted from the kitchen, and it seemed that he had also put in green asparagus. I didn't want to miss my flight at 3 in the afternoon. I didn't say goodbye to Christopher and directly opened the door and walked out, just a few steps away. I suddenly remembered the day I left New York for Los Angeles 4 years ago. I don't think I ever mentioned to Christopher why I approached him back then. When I was 9, my parents died in an accident and I was sent to my grandmother's house. There are a lot of memories from my childhood that are blurred. I only remember being pushed back and forth by relatives like an abandoned bundle. It was hard to settle down at my grandmother's house, but I realized that my uncle always looked at me with uncomfortable eyes. One late night, he got drunk and actually touched into my room. While struggling, I touched the fruit knife on the table. In that instant, I lost my cool, grabbed the knife and stabbed. Blood flowed down his forehead, and my uncle collapsed on the floor and didn't move. I thought I was in big trouble, scared. I ran out barefoot and almost hit a parked luxury car. The driver was a little angry when a teenager got out of the car. He didn't ask anything, just gave me a couple bills to buy a pair of shoes. And a Smith Group business card. Maybe I really was a born liar for many years. Because I was afraid of being dumped again, I always pretended to be cold and ruthless, striving for perfection. I couldn't keep lying to myself any longer, so I went back to Christopher's room. He stared at me with a dumbfounded look on his face and secretly hid the sleeping pills in his hand. I pretended I didn't see it and just said, "I have a flight to LA at 3 p.m. Christopher's expression slumped a bit, but he nodded. I then asked, "This time, are we going together?" Christopher froze for a moment. After a while, he gave a warm smile. "Okay, wherever we go from now on, I will accompany you."